Okay, so we're back. It's 2 days before the test in Mbombela Stadium, the finale of the Castle Lager Rugby Championship. No, Castle Lager Rugby Championship. South Africa against Argentina, the finale. Not often you don't see the All Blacks challenging for a trophy, but it's quite interesting to have the Pumas, and it gives this game a bit of spice where we probably thought this wouldn't have had much spice.
Yeah, I think I said it to you at the end of our last little interview earlier in the week after, I think it was the morning after the game in San Diego. I said that it sounds terribly unpatriotic, but in a way I was pleased that the more I think about it, the less pleased I am. We really didn't. We really shouldn't have lost that game. I mean, I was going to say we didn't deserve to lose. We did deserve. The Springboks did deserve to lose, but really, it wasn't a game that a world champion team should be losing. Those 4 tries given away in such quick time, was to me a glaring sort of error on the part of the Boks. And some of them were quite bad defensive errors. But to go back to what you're saying. It is nice having something on this last game. It would have also been great to come here sort of knowing that it was just going to be a celebration. But I fancy then the Boks might, I think Rassie does sort of welcome this sort of situation. He likes the players to be under pressure. You don't learn anything by playing 10 games against Portugal, or 10 games against the Argentinian side of the past. You play a couple of games against top opposition and teams that have beaten you before, and you've got something on the line. That's how good players prove that they belong at the highest level.
Yeah, I think it's you could feel it being around the city here in Nelspruit the whole week. You could feel the sort of. It feels like an old school test match. It feels like the whole sort of town, city, it's not a town, is sort of coming together for this. There's a lot of excitement around it. Sold out. It's the first time Argentina have ever sold out in South Africa in the modern era, which is, and I'm not sure they ever sold out they might have somewhere in the 80s or something like that, when we didn't have international sport. When
they came here as the Jaguars, I remember one of my first test matches I ever went to. In fact, probably the first test match, because I'd been to All Black games against Natal and that at Kings Park. They played the Jaguars in Durban in 1980, and that was definitely a sellout.
Yeah. So in the modern era, it's the first time that they've sold out. So that's great news. Just looking this week, there's been a lot of reaction. I felt the fan reaction, which is I understand people don't like Springboks losing, but I felt some of it was a bit overboard. We're talking about a team that's gone unbeaten in the Rugby Championship until last week, and then lost by 1 point with the last kick of the game. It's hardly the eras of the past, when they lost 57-0 or anything like that. But I suppose in the context of this team, it just shows you how high the standards are and what the expectations are from fans.
Well, it is the thing now that when you're a successful team, you build up expectations, and you don't expect them to lose now. And I think the All Blacks had it. One of the reasons that the All Blacks are still overreact. I mean, I still think that they overreacted to 2 test defeats against the Boks, is because they're used to that culture of success. And I think South Africans, they don't want to give ammunition, because we always know that there's people out there who don't like the Springboks. And I must say that our old mate Stephen Jones, who I really rate as a journalist, but he does sometimes think that he's got appear to have something in for the Boks. He was at it again, I think the day before yesterday, talking about how it was great. It was the Pumas were challenging the All Blacks and the Springboks. Let's see them win games more consistently against the Springboks before we start talking about them challenging. I think that this was the game in San Diego, the one that the Boks lost last week, was the first time the Boks have lost since Santiago, not in America, not in the United States, but it was the first game that the Boks have lost to Argentina since they became world champions in 2019. And I think subsequent to 2019, Springbok rugby has taken a step up, but both in the quality of their rugby, in the depth of our game, and also in the status of the expectations. The last time Rassie, prior to San Diego, the previous time that Rassie lost to them was that in his very first season, where he was fooling around with his selections because he was trying to get everything right, I think, for the All Blacks, if I remember correctly. So things have changed since then. So that's why there maybe was a bit of a overreaction, but it's understandable. I mean, we don't want the Boks to lose. I was more disappointed, to be honest, with the second test against Ireland, because that was a game where we really need to make. We know that we're better than Argentina. I mean, I expect the Boks to, and we're going to talk about this later, but I expect the Boks to win comfortably on Saturday. But against Ireland, there was a lot to prove because they'd beaten us so many times in a row, and we know the Irish people think their team's the world champions. So that game in Durban where we threw it away in the last 20 minutes of that game. Our game management was terrible in the last 10 minutes of that game. I was far more upset about that game just because it was like that's the unofficial World Championship, and in the end, Ireland left here having drawn the series 1-1 rather than having taught a lesson, which I thought was going to happen.
Well, and I think they are number one in the world rankings now again after the loss last week, which makes a bit of a mockery of that loss because of the world rankings, should I say? Because I mean, yeah, it's one loss, and Ireland will lose games in the Six Nations here and there. So I just find it quite bizarre that. But
I didn't even know that. That's ridiculous. How did that
well,
come about?
if we apparently lose, we lose points because Argentina.
Because the people don't rate Argentina that high.
Yeah, they're not.
Argentina would give Ireland a good
It's
go.
like the duck
They
with
beat France. They beat France and Argentina not that long ago.
The thing with Argentina, though, is you talk about consistency's been their biggest problem. Even this season, I mean, they had that wonderful win over the All Blacks in Wellington, and the next week got pumped. And so that's their big thing. They lost their first game against Australia, and then turned it on in the second game. So
Well, every time a team that's more highly rated than them has to respond after a poor performance against Argentina, they do. South Africa have done it historically. New Zealand have done it a couple of, because they responded. They'd lost in New Zealand, I think 2 years ago as well, and they responded and won quite well the following week. So that to me is a growing sort of step that's a step that Argentina have to take. But Tommy, you were here this week. I know that the Boks spoke about the area where Argentina has improved, and I have been looking at that, and I mean it's just quite phenomenal that our discipline. We've got areas that we need to improve, and one of them is discipline. I mean, we just have way too many cards. There have been cards in just about every game, whereas Argentina haven't had a card in, I think, the last 12 games.
yeah, I mean, it goes back. I mean, you even think in that game in Brisbane where the Boks were 30 points up, and they had 2 yellow cards right in the last 10 minutes, and it allowed Australia to score. There has been disciplinary problems. It is an issue, and although they're good enough to scramble and scrap and win, and even against the All Blacks, where the All Blacks got cards, that sort of turned in the Boks' favour. Their play hasn't been great overall. There's been areas in every game that you can pinpoint, but on your point about Argentina, they haven't had a single card in this rugby championship, which is surprising because that's normally part of their downfall in most games. And I say that with knowing that Thomas Lavanini is back in the team and he's the yellow card merchant.
But they'll get one on Saturday.
But he certainly is a borderline player, great player, but sometimes crosses that line too quickly. But they've been brilliant in terms of that discipline, and that's somewhere this BOK team still needs to go. So, a friend of ours, John Cardinelli, did a story the other day about how many of this BOK team are going to be too old or 35 plus by the next World Cup, and it's a very interesting one. And he made the point there that the Boks have got 30, 33, 34 tests before a World Cup. If you think that's not a lot of time, especially when you started with players who had their first test of the season, Sasha, those type of guys. So you need to use these opportunities, and those selections are going to bite you sometime, and I thought they bit them last week.
Well, I mean, a lot of people talk to me about Rassie being a genius and being brave and being bold and taking gambles. I don't actually necessarily see it that way. In fact, I don't necessarily see it. I don't need to qualify it. I don't see it that way. It's like Sasha's selection. People are sort of saying, "Well, gee, that's a bold decision, and it's a stroke." Somebody said to me, "It's a stroke of genius on his part," because I don't think he's got a choice. We need three flower halves, and if Marnie. Was thrown away after that game last week. When do you bring him back? Because imagine that we get to Twickenham in November, and both Andre and Sasha are injured, which could happen. Who's the next cab off the rank? It's Marnie, and then Russie has to sit there in front of the media and say, "I rate Marnie, and we have full confidence in him." Whereas we would know that he doesn't, because he's dropped him after one miss in Argentina. And when it comes to him changing up selections, he also doesn't have an option. He has got, whether we like it or not, he has got a very old team, and if you've got a very old team, you can't expect. I know that all the players say. I mean, we did it into. Well, it wasn't actually this week, but I was looking at a YouTube interview with Damien Derlendi before the game in Cape Town against the All Blacks, and I was part of an interview with Jesse Creel a couple of weeks before that, and those guys all sort of are quite convinced that they could still be around in a couple of years' time, but. We're only going to know that when that time arrives, and it would actually be a dereliction of duty on Russie's part, given the depth of talent we have in this country. I mean, if we were another nation and we didn't have any depth, then I'd say, listen, just play these guys until they die. But we don't have that. We don't have that excuse.
I was going to say, you talk about the Flavs, and I mean, I had a conversation with a couple of people this week about who's the next guy. Because obviously everyone's talking about Marnie, but if not Marnie, who's the next guy? And Jordan Hendricks' name comes up, because obviously his Currie Cup final kick that everybody watched, and a brilliant kick for him.
Except he played fullback there.
Yeah, exactly. But then you think to yourself, he's had one test.
Yeah.
So unless you're going to put him in now and play him for the next 20 odd tests, where is he going to get a chance there? And I reckon he will get a chance on the end of year tour. But you're going to have a situation where you're going to have guys with 10, 15 caps going into that World Cup.
And it's actually, Jordan is an excellent example, because if you go back and watch that test against Wales, I mean, it's not like I'm going to do that because it wasn't like the most memorable game, but I've got a very good memory of that game. It was the same day as you were at Loftus for the URC final. He was actually very nervous in that first test. So he does need another run at some point to when he's got less nerves. We talk about Marnie missing kicks. I mean, he missed kicks in that game. It was Sasha who came on and nailed that long kick. I mean, he was the guy who showed nerves of steel. But I think when I wrote the match report of that game, I think I mentioned a nervy performance from Jordan Hendricks. And the only the way you're going to get rid of those nerves, or alternatively, whether the coaches are going to find out whether it's nerves or you just don't belong at that level, is actually to play. And Russie has to do that. And John's quite right. I actually written, I think for one of my Business Day columns earlier in the year, I counted the number of tests that were left. It's not a lot. Everybody thinks 4 years. 4 years isn't a lot. And 2027 is going to be here before you know it. And you don't want a fly half like Marnie was at the last World Cup, who had played 10 or 11 tests by the time the World Cup arrives. You want the fly halves that are going to be required. And Andre could be injured or too old. Sasha could be injured. He's a very physical player. I think he's going to get injured a lot in his career. And then, of course, there's I'm sort of completely, just suddenly came into my brain now. You mentioned the fourth fly half. The fourth fly half probably isn't Jordan. It's probably actually Damien Willemse. I think if you speak to Russie, he'll probably tell you that Damien Willemse.
But then I want to throw in another spanner in that works. Then you'll have Sharks fans saying, "What about Sia Masuku?" And but the point I'm making, and this is not disparaging any of those guys, but there is a pecking order, and there is only limited time and limited tests, and somewhere somebody's going to lose out. And it's always unfortunate because we've got a lot of talent in our country, but that's precisely the thing. There's not enough tests to give everybody a decent run. And obviously the caveat to that is as well, you have to win still. So people want the Springboks to win. They want the results to stay the same, and to do that, you can't just throw all the experienced players out, and that jigsaw puzzle is difficult.
Well, on Sia Masuku, the URC starts. Well, it started last week, but it actually starts. The Vodacom United Rugby Championship starts for the South African teams tomorrow. So let's see Sia Masuku get a proper run there before we start talking about whether he's a Springbok or not. I don't know if John Plumtree thinks that he's an international player. I think he rates Jordan as well, but I think some of the rest of the coaches actually think, talking about David Williams and company, also I believe that Jordan is probably a better fly half than he is a fullback, but they're giving him a run at fullback to see how he goes there. Remembering too, of course, that the Sharks have Afalele Fassi. So Jordan might well end up having to move back to fly half. I think that they will probably choose him ahead of Masuku when that time comes. My money says that. I think that Jordan Hendricks is a better fly half than Sia Masuku. Sia Masuku is a very good guy to have in your books, and he kicks well under pressure and so forth. But I'm not sure, having watched the last couple of games of the Currie Cup, I'm not sure he has quite the sort of stamp on the game than some of the other fly halves we're talking about, and that includes.
But he's also, I mean, he can still develop as well.
Yeah, he's 27.
So, yeah. But okay, let's turn to obviously we're talking about the celebration in this weekend's game. The one big celebration, which there will be, win or lose, and obviously bigger if they win, is Eben Etzebeth becoming the most capped Springbok of all time. He's certainly been a servant of Springbok rugby, and quite a and I've said it before as well, quite a different guy away from the field than you see on the field. He's a very interesting person, and often, sort of, because he's so aggressive on the field, sort of tagged with that line. But I think Evan's been a great servant for South African rugby, and he's part of, and I don't think we say it enough, but he's part of this golden generation, because this is a golden generation. If you think of the Rassie mentioned the other day, the first 4 guys he signed was Eben Sia, Frans Malherbe, and Stephen Kitsoff.
And all at the Western Province
Yeah,
Academy. And Damien Delendi was part of under 19. He wasn't at the academy, but he was part of that under 19 team. He was still at the school. I don't know if you read my piece this morning in supersport.com. He was part of the Western Province under 19 team because Western Province school selectors had ignored him. Damien Delendi didn't play Craven Week, so the coach of Milnerton, Heinrich Martin, took him to Nazir Adams, who was the under-19 coach at the time, and said, listen, please look at this guy. He's been ignored by the Western Province school selectors. I think that he's a good player. Give him a chance. And he went and he played a trial game, and then he ended up playing every Western Province under-19. So he wasn't part of that academy. He wasn't signed by Rassie then, but he was part of the under-19 team that represented the academy. So he was in with Sia and with Frans Malherbe, with Stephen Kitsoff, with Eben, and with I was trying to think of these. Scurra and Tabeni. Okay, he never went on to become a great Springbok, but Scurra was also part of that group, and Nizam Khan actually was also part of that group, if I remember correctly. So it was a golden generation, certainly for Western Province. The first time I came across Eben Etzebeth, funnily enough, was quite interesting because he had played Varsity Cup rugby, but at that stage I wasn't watching. I sometimes get interested in Varsity Cup rugby, and then other times I don't. I always just sort of feel like there's too many gimmicks and things in Varsity Cup rugby. I find it hard. I'm too much of a traditionalist. I mean, a try's always got to be 5 points. It can't be sort of more points because they've started off, the genesis of the movement started off further back in the field. That doesn't make sense. So I struggle with Varsity Cup rugby. But he'd obviously played for UCT at that point, Eben Etzebeth. But I was actually at a great legend. In fact, the man he's overtaking tomorrow. That's Victor Matfield. I was at his book launch in Cape Town. You remember that him and De Jong Boortschard wrote that book. I think it was in 2011. It was actually the same year that I did Peter de Villiers' book. And I was at Victor's book launch. So if I remember correctly, it was at the One and Only in Cape Town. And he had this guy, this really strong-looking guy with him, and I didn't know who he was, a young guy. And I thought, and I asked somebody, and I said, who is that? And they said, no, it's Eben Etzebeth. And of course, I knew the name because the Etzebeth are legends in Cape Town. Very tough family that he comes from, and also very good at wrestling as well. But I remember somebody said, no, he's one of the Etzebeths. And I think Victor at the time was probably had spent the day with him. I think he was trying to get him to come to the Bulls. I think Victor probably recognised that there was a great talent coming up, and Victor's been proved correct because tomorrow Eben's going to overtake his record.
Well, that's the thing. And I mean, Eben looks like he can still play another couple of years. Of course, he should be managed, but yeah, he can easily make it to another World Cup. And I think he's one of the guys I would hope makes it to another World Cup. Because if you look at the lock stocks at the moment, especially four lock, there's not many. I mean, Solomon's the next guy, but there's behind him, there's not too many. There's a couple of youngsters coming through. But again, same thing as we spoke. They're not getting tests at the moment. So.
You've given me an opening here to talk about Solomon, actually, because I know that there's some people still knocking Solomon after last week's game. And I watched. I don't care. I watched that game again, the Santiago game. And you watch that. You've got to always remember what type of game the Boks are playing on a given day. And everybody's like expecting Solomon to be this big carrier like Eben Etzebeth is, and that they expect him to be like this aggressive guy who's going to charge into the opposition. And on days he is that. But if you watch the role that he played last week's game, he's obviously got really good soft skills, because remember, the Springboks were running the ball from all over the place, and remember, they also have designated carriers. So the designated carriers were Ruan Nurki was carrying quite a lot, but the guy who was carrying the most probably was Jasper Wiese and Malcolm Marx. They had those guys as the carriers. So Salman wasn't actually operating as a carrier in that game. He was standing there. I mean, I wish this was a ball. Like he would get the ball, and then like he'd be the guy who'd either turn it that way or turn it that way. He was almost like a sort of fly half, the first receiver. I mean, that was the role that he was playing in that game. Like Damien Delendi at one stage was criticised by everybody because people said he can't pass. He just runs, takes the ball up. But that's the game that the Springboks were playing at that time, particularly at that World Cup under Heineke, where after the defeat to Japan and Brighton, it was understandable that Heineke sort of almost got a bit spooked. So we went ultra conservative, and it wasn't just Damien who took the ball up. It was almost like Skulk played flower half that. Well, Skulk Berger I'm talking about. Remember, they just took the ball up, and you would think that Damien doesn't have a pass, but we all know that Damien does have a pass. Ask him to play a different game, and he will. So, and that's the story with Salman as well. He wasn't actually a designate. He didn't look like he was a designate. He came on later on, and he actually ended up playing with Urban, and he carried a few times then in those last few minutes. But in that first part of the game, this was Salman's role, like, you know, getting the ball, and he'd either bring in this guy, he'd bring in that guy, like switching direction. It was almost like he was the fulcrum of directing the traffic, if you like. So criticism of Salman after last week's game, because we didn't see him be the traditional full lock. No, you didn't. But clearly that wasn't the plan.
Yeah, I think. Listen, my whole thing with that is we've seen in our careers players who start slowly, who take a while to become good Springboks, who sort of flourish at certain times, and the coaches know this, and I feel, just on the bottom line, Rassie and them have earned the right to know what they're doing with him. And I think I said it to you the other day in the conversation. I said it reminds me a little bit about Sia, right at the start of Sia's career as well. He was also not the most flashy player. There was also people saying, is he good enough?
I think Salman is flashier. I mean, what I'm talking to you about just now, he actually look at his ball skills. For a lock, he's got amazing ball skills. If I think of a lock with great ball skills, then I would think of Argeas Neyman. I think that guy's got the best ball skills of a lock in the world, outside of the Kiwis. The Kiwis always have great forwards that have and the other guy who's actually got good ball skills, funnily enough, and it may be because he was also coached by John Mitchell for a season or two at the Bulls, was actually Lot Diop.
Yeah, no, that's good, great ball skills, and both of them got these ultra long arms. I mean, that's the other thing. You can get your ball away. This weekend, let's look quickly at the selections. Other than Mani,
we can still talk about Mani too.
No, I know, but because,
I mean, to me, there's no debate. I mean, Rassie is 100% correct to retain Mani.
Yeah, look, I agree with that, because I think the best thing, and Rassie made it quite clear, best thing is to get back on the horse, and I agree totally with that, because, as you said, and you made the point, it's not like we've got other guys at the moment, and he is our third fly half, so you have to back him.
And he's world class. As a fly half, not as a kicker, as a fly half. He is actually international class. He is a very good fly half. He played. I counted it. I think he's played 60 minutes this year, because he played for the first 40 minutes against Portugal, and then I think he played. Did he play 20 or 30 last week? He didn't play very long last week, so he's played 60 or 70 minutes. It's very difficult to get up your momentum when you played so little.
His tactical kicking was very good last week. I went back and looked at it, and I mean, as we spoke on Sunday, in that his first kick was actually more difficult than the one he missed, and to me, so I agree, he hasn't had a lot of chance, and I think just other thing that people also a lot of times, and we've seen it so many times in Springbok teams in the past, where a coach loses a change room, where something like that happens, where the first sign of weakness, a coach panics, and he throws the player out, etc., and then he starts losing the change room, because then the other players say, well, if it can happen to him, if I have one bad game, I'm gone. Now, I know people are going to say, yeah, but you play for the jersey and you have to play your best game, but we're all human. The players are human. They have those, and players get backed by coaches, and players play with confidence because they get backed. So in that respect, I think it's a great decision with Mani. Plus, they said they're going to have backup for him. So Cheslin and Jaden have both been kicking at practice. Why did they actually give Damien a chance to kick? Because I was talking to a schools coach yesterday, and he was talking about, apparently he plays for Wild Nice Panasonic. Yeah. Apparently he's been kicking goals quite well for them. I'm not sure. He was a school at Milnerton
high, he was a schoolboy kicker. But I mean, when I say school, I mean he was the guy who kicked for posts, and apparently he hardly ever missed. So they should actually give him a go at some point.
They should. Well, I mean,
but just staying, it's just like,
maybe we'll see even kick a conversion this weekend on his.
I mean, why can't a lock kick? I mean, it's just,
John Eels did.
I remember. I can't remember what the occasion was, but Ollie Leroux kicking a conversion right at the end of a Sharks game many years ago. But the thing with Mani is that he's just give the guy an opportunity. I mean, he hasn't played much this year. He doesn't. We said it. I mean, I don't want to contradict myself. I don't like him as the first choice goal kicker. But having said that, sometimes there are times when he doesn't miss. I mean, there were times for the Storm. I think he was the top scorer in the URC that year that the Stormers won the URC. There are times when he doesn't miss, and I always use the example of Percy Montgomery's the best example of a player who was sprayed it all over the place early in his career. Then later on, he was like a metronome and he was kicking him from all over the place. Ruan Pina, I think we mentioned before. But to me, it's just Mani has to play again after what happened last week. He does need another chance to play, and I've got a feeling that we'll see him play really well on Saturday.
I was going to say the selection, I was going to ask about the other selections because they've gone with type in terms of we expected the same midfield. We expected the two wingers to be who they are, Cheslin and Kirtley. Not surprised Apalele got another shot because he's done well, and again trying to get a guy to get more and more caps. And then Mani and of course Jaden, I think because of his tactical kicking, he'll take some pressure off Mani as well. And then I looked at it. The interesting thing for me was going with the 5-3 bench. And it seems every time we've got a team that wants to try and run us off our feet. I haven't gone to check these stats, so I might be a little bit wrong. But the feeling I have is that then we revert to a 5-3. We don't go for the 6-2 because we're a bit worried. And this weekend, Argentina are going to come out and try and score tries. Could be a good or a bad thing for them. We'll have to see. But I do think that's probably one of the things that influenced the bet.
I do think that there's an interesting trend, and I think we have discussed this before with Lecagno. It looks like they're pushing him at 12. Andre Esthuizen, I mean, talking about cards, I mean, since that red card against Portugal, we haven't seen him again. Yeah. And I do almost get the feeling that the type of rugby that the Boks are playing, and I'm not saying that Andre Esthuizen doesn't have soft skills anyway, because the guys at Harlequins will tell you that when he played for Harlequins, he was a great passer of the ball. But in South African rugby, he's often just that traditional South African guy, the enforcer who takes the ball up, like Damien was asked to be in the 2015 World Cup, and we were talking about before. So yeah, I do find I find interesting what type of centres, what type of midfields we're putting out now. When we got Lecagno at 12, it's a very different type of midfield to our traditional sort of South African midfields. And yeah, it's just interesting looking at that at that BOK team now. How you look at when you look at the bench, we don't know what's going to happen on Saturday. Like, the opposition won't know, but we also don't know. Is Andre going to come on at 12 and play the rest of the game as a 12, and then maybe we'll see Lecagno moving into 13, his usual position? There are just so many options open to Rassie, and he can just keep the opposition guessing.
Well, the one I find very interesting is we don't have a lock on the bench, and that's partly because I'm sure part of it is because of all the injuries we've got at the moment, but the other part of it is Elric's going to double up with that. So does Peter Steff go to lock?
Probably will.
Yeah, and that's the probable one. But Elric has played lock as well. He's not the tallest lock, but he can do it in an emergency. But they obviously feel he's the one player I feel in terms of physicality has stood up in this test season, and he's impressed me because I always thought he was a bit at times one-dimensional for the Bulls, but he's really impressed me with.
No, he's impressed me as well. I had my doubts about him before the season started. I wouldn't say I had my doubts about Ruan Oki. I just thought that he'd take a while to develop, and he's actually impressed me as well. I think Ruan's also making strides forward.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, Ruan's thing to me, his work rate, anybody who watches him at the Bulls knows his work rate is unquestionable. But I always felt maybe he needs another 5 or 10 kgs on him. He just
You're talking about Ruan now.
Yeah.
Absolutely, as a lock. And you know what? It's one of my big bugbears. We talk about it a lot. We can't play a 12-month season, and one of the reasons we can't play a 12-month season isn't just because it fatigues the players, but we need a period where the guys can condition themselves. And he's a player that needs conditioning. Funnily enough, I think that Kane and Moody probably needs a bit of conditioning, because he's a guy who can bump players off, but he put on a couple of extra kilograms of muscle, that guy, and I promise you he'll be South Africa's Jonah Lomu. Okay, Jonah Lomu's a bit extreme, but he would be that kind of player.
just interesting. Just turning to Argentina's selection, 7 changes to their starting lineup. They obviously lost Marcus Kramer coming in here, but they've dropped Pablo Matera. What's his name? Juan Martin Gonzalez. I must get this right, because there's so many Juan Martins in Argentinian rugby. The one who plays at Saracens, the flankers, in there as well. And then the back, they got Santiago Carreras at fullback, which is interesting. So they got both their fly-offs in the back line. So it's an interesting one. They're obviously looking. They feel that gives them the edge, and they can score tries that way, and they can rack up points that way.
You sort of expect there to be changes, though, when you've got a very short turnover, change around, and you've played one game in South America, and then you're playing the next one. And you'll remember that when the All Blacks, because for a long time in the Rugby Championship, it used to be that the All Blacks would go for their penultimate game, they would go to Argentina, and then they would come here, sort of on the way home. And they never played the same teams in both those games. Even if the Rugby Championship was on the line, they never did that. They always made 7 or 8 changes, and they made a lot of changes. And I mean, normally it would be the top team that played at Ellis Park, and then a sort of changed up team there. But I think there is something in that. I mean, that you don't, if you're playing 2 games, and if I was the Argentinian coach, I'd also think of the emotion of last week. I think we've seen this season that the emotion of a big win can sometimes rebound on you a week later, and if you've got like a transatlantic flight on top of all of that, I think he's being wise to have fresh players. The Boks will have fresh players on Saturday. I mean, a lot of the guys. I mean, the Damien Delendi's coach at Milnerton was telling me he was at the school the week before last because he had a week off. He wasn't in Argentina with the rest of the guys. So they're fresh and they're hungry.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons. Rusty also pointed to it this week. One of the reasons why they did that is because the way the Rugby Championship works at the moment, they flew back on a charter flight together, both teams. And he said, yeah, it's not like in the old days we used to do Tri Nations and you used to come back and you'd wait for them. There'd be a week off and then they'd arrive. And so you don't get that advantage of being at home and waiting for a team anymore. They came with you, and
which is a good thing.
yeah, and that's why they've obviously left players here and they've tried to mix it up. I think we must get to a prediction.
I think I must say happy birthday to you first. You were talking when you were talking earlier on about Eerden Etzebeth. You were talking about Eerden Etzebeth, and you said there's a big celebration. I was thinking, is that the way you talk about your birthday? But I mean, it's today, of course. It's not on Saturday. Eerden's big day is on Saturday. Your birthday is tonight, so I hope you have a good time.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and we'll also have a celebration tonight. We'll definitely have a beer or two at least, or something.
Yeah, definitely, and a nice peri-peri chicken somewhere. We're close to Mozambique. There's also a restaurant called Mozambique.
Yeah, we'll be in the restaurant Mozambique. Not
Well, it's just not far. I mean, go down to Komatipoort and you can cross the border. We could go to Maputo tonight.
we might not make it back before the game. That's what worries me, and not because we think of anything dangerous.
I forgot to bring my passport anyway. So,
well, there's the reason. Yeah, just a prediction. I think I didn't have a birthday present from West Ham last night. Gavin's very happy.
Oh yes, I forgot about 5-1. 5-1 to Liverpool.
Yeah.
1-1 at half time though. That's when I stopped following.
No, I was watching. We were sitting in a local pub here, the Jock. People know the Jock around here, and I was watching when it became 2-1 when they got the red card. Yeah, then I just thought, okay, well, that's it. So hopefully the Boks can give me a proper present this week.
And they will. The Boks to win by at least 15.
Yeah, I think
I'm not going to interrogate it further. That's my thing. At least mark those words. At least 15. So if they win by 35, it doesn't mean I was wrong.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an emphatic victory. I'm not sure if it's going to be emphatic on the scoreboard, but it'll be comfortable. But I think it'll be emphatic on the field.
I don't think we're going to be sitting there gnawing our nails. And I think I've told you I've got that acid reflux problem, which seems to have miraculously gone in the last couple of days. But I had it in Cape Town and that whole game because that game was just always so.
I should have had a camera on you. You would have been quite funny to watch. But anyway.
And the last minutes of the Ellis Park game. I mean, when the Boks came back, and then I mean, I think Saturday is going to be a game where it's not going to be squeaky bum territory. I think we're going to see the Boks win fairly comfortably, and it will be the Boks. I don't think we were wrong. Well, I was wrong earlier in the week. I know in my SuperSport piece, and in fact, when we spoke last, we were talking about points differential and everything, and obviously it's not points differential. If Argentina win with a bonus point, and they deny South Africa, and obviously if they get a bonus point, it means they've scored three more tries. But that's not going to happen. I mean, so
they've only won in South Africa once, and that was in 2015 in Durban. In the all their tests here in South Africa. So it would have to be a hell of a shake-up for them to win like that. You could see them maybe even sneaking a win, but I can't see. I think what's going to happen is they're going to go out all guns blazing, and the Boks will take control of that. They'll shut that down. So, as I say,
here's one thing though, because the one thing we haven't spoken about is we're standing up here. I mean, I got out of the car today. I came down with air conditioning and everything. I was in Joburg last night, and I came down today, and I got out and I felt like I was in Dubai. I mean, that's how hot it was. And last week, Rassie sort of used the excuse. One of the things he said was that it was very hot over there. The one team that maybe there's two teams that we don't have an advantage against in the heat. One would be Argentina, and obviously if we played Japan, because Japan, I've been to Japan, they play rugby in some excruciating heat. But every other nation we've got an advantage against. This one, the Argentinians, we don't. They want -37 degrees heat here on Saturday.
And it's hot. So if you're coming to Nelspruit, bring a hat, bring lots of liquid refreshment, whatever that form that takes for you, so that you can keep yourself hydrated, because that's something we're going to go do soon. And let us know your comments and your predictions. Do you think Gavin and I are wrong? I'm sure you'll tell us in the comments. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. We'll be back on Sunday analysing the BOK victory, hopefully.
Will be a BOK victory.
Yeah.
And I don't have a shadow of a doubt.
Well, we'll chat to you then. Cheers.